This is an interview with Simon Shima, longtime Subud member, and I guess his occupation has been city planner for many years.
That is correct.
Are you retired at this point?
Yes.
Okay. Simon, the first thing I'm going to ask you is about your experience as a young boy at the time when America dropped the bomb on Hiroshima. Can you tell us a little bit about what you experienced back then?
Sure. A little bit of background. I was born and raised in Osaka, the second largest city in Japan, about a population of 3 million. And 1945, toward the end of the war, 4 months before the end of the war, Japanese government issued a decree by which all non-productive population, kids and older people, leave big cities which have been bombarded with American bombings. So my family sent me to Hiroshima, just outside of the city of Hiroshima. It's now the part of the city of Hiroshima. And I was sent to the family I never met before. And 4 months into it, war finally came to the end. Just before that particular day, I was on a school ground. I was 9 years old, fourth grader. And 8 o'clock in the morning, we all gathered together outdoors, and then principal gave a speech every morning for 10 minutes or something. And after that, we are marching back to our own classrooms. And all of a sudden, silence went off. So we are trained to get down to the ground, cover our eyes with 2 fingers and ears with the thumbs, and then stay close to the ground. And then all of a sudden I felt a hot blast. It was hot. And then windows, I was close to the building, windows all coming down on us. And then loud sound. And we didn't know what that was. Even though the place I was staying, our school ground was approximately 7 miles from ground zero. But I still remember how I felt, hot blast. And then we went back to the classroom, windows and doors all blown away. And then we are dismissed from school. And on the way home, I had to cross the highway coming from Hiroshima to outside. And when I crossed about an hour after the blast, I already started seeing people crawling on the ground, and then trucks carrying out of dead body or injured body. And that evening, every household in the neighborhood received a victim to take care of, total stranger, a middle-aged woman whose clothing was burned. So somewhere she picked up a curtain and she put the curtain around her body and spent the night with us. And then next day she took off. And then every day afterwards, so many people were dying in a little town I was staying, and there's no way of disposing the body. So every night about dinner time, they placed bodies in a town square and then pour gasoline and burn. That's the only way they could dispose of the dead. That was my experience. And then again, some people escape to our neighborhoods, come to their friend's house or relative's home. And then for the first time, I kept hearing adults crying for pain. For the first time in my life, I should remember that.
Yeah, wow. It's amazing. So how did you go on from there? And
Okay. The month after the war ended, and then my mother and brother came to pick me up. And then we got on the train only 300 miles away to Osaka. It took us 11 hours to get home. But luckily, our house in Osaka was escaped from the firebombing. So the house was there for us, for me.
So how did you get from there to the United States?
That's a good story. When I first came to Seattle to attend the University of Washington, at the age of 27, I've already finished undergraduate in Japan at the age of 22, and I worked with a corporation in Tokyo for 5 years. And then all foreign students have to take basic English class. It's an uncredited class, but it was a requirement. And a teacher who was the same age as I, we became friends. He was 27 years old, a doctoral student in linguistics. And then once he's from Michigan, Tom Hess, he asked me, knowing about my background, why did you come to the US? But I consider that to be my destiny, whatever that might be. I think I was guided to be here.
So how did you first find and come into Subud?
All right. As usual, I have a long story and short story. Short story first. In 1958, summertime. At that time, I knew two Dutch bankers working and living in Osaka. And then they told me about the Subud. They gave me a half-page write-up written in Japanese about Subud. When I read that document really resonated with me. So this is a story. I met those gentlemen year before, 1957. I was still in college, my senior year, and I was coming very close to my personal crisis. Thought of terminating my life. Life was too painful to go on. And one day, I just wanted to visit my old friend, some 20 miles away. And he wasn't at home, but his family told me that he'll be contacting me. And I don't know why I visited a friend at a particular time. We hadn't been that close, but I knew him through YMCA. We went to a separate college, and he lived far away. Again, talking about destiny. And he contacted me saying he started going to a meeting, and if I'm interested in, please come join us. That was a meeting, the International Discussion Forum talking about spirituality primarily. The international forum by which Japanese student, bunch of about 4 or 5 college students, and then some business people, like 2 Dutch bankers, 1 American missionary, 1 East Indian businessman, and then a couple of Chinese young ladies. The intent was we all have a different backgrounds. Our approach will be different. Our spiritual path will be different, but we all come together, finding and reaching God. That was the whole purpose of our gathering. And we met once a month. And then each month, one of them was assigned to present a paper. And then we discussed about the subject. And that's the reason why I met those 2 Dutch bankers. And then we kept up with at that time I was living in Osaka. Meeting was primarily in Kobe and other places. And then 58 March, I graduated from college, and then beginning April, I started working in Osaka. The reason why I picked that particular company was my mother, I was living just with my mother. She told me that don't leave town. I have to find a job in Osaka, my native town. So I carefully picked the company, which the job will stay in Osaka, so I can stay there. And then soon I was sent to headquarters office in Tokyo for training, new employees training. About 17 of us gathered from all over the country. And after the training, I was told my big boss that you cannot go home. You'll be reassigned to Tokyo. So we went back to home for a couple of weeks. And at that time, I met 2 gentlemen. Some of you might know. One is Michael Roch, R-O-G-G. Probably he's about 93 years old now living in Amsterdam. Perhaps he's the oldest Subud member in the Western countries. He was opened by Hussein Rofe in Hong Kong in 1954 or something. And then he took a home leave. Instead of going back to Holland, he spent a month in Jakarta with Papa. And he's still active. He's no longer active as a helper, but being the oldest member probably in Europe, people come to do Latvian with him at his home. And then another gentleman is Hans Brinkmann. By the way, I'm still in touch with both gentlemen. And then Hans later dropped out of Subud, but Michael is still doing Latvian. And then when they find out I'll be moving to Tokyo, they gave me that paper, brief outline of Subud. And then there is a group in Tokyo. So if you're interested in contact such and such, it turned out to be Rosa Tatebe. Many of you may be aware of who he was. He passed away last year. So I contacted him and then tried preparing myself to be open. And at that time, Tokyo group could not find a Latvian place. But each time they rented, they got kicked out because the noises they make. So it was delayed until late 1958. And just before I was scheduled to be open, my mother in Osaka passed away, a heart attack. She wasn't aware of she had a heart problem. So I went back home. So it delayed my opening. So finally, January 8th, I suppose, in 1959, I was open. And I stayed with the Tokyo group for 5 years before I came to Seattle to go to the University of Washington.
So what has your experience of the Ladihan been?
so many years of doing Latvian, it's very difficult to put it in words, but I would say without my encounter with Subud, more than likely I would not be here. Life was too painful, probably I decided to go away.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that my path in Subud has been that smooth and easy, because I have three major, now it turned out considered to be Subud crises while I was a young man in Tokyo. It's almost a near-death experience, but somehow I've survived.
So when you say crisis, do you mean like a spiritual thing related to the Latihan or something different?
Probably spiritual crisis. Each crisis lasted for 3 months, and then very similar experiences all 3 times. What happened was that I lost my will, my mind, in other words. My will was taken away. I was a zombie. And I don't know how I kept on going to office. Of course, it was a career disaster, and I lost my job, even though Japanese corporation didn't fire me. It kept me, but another very easy assignment. But I still remember one day, Sunday, for instance, I was in my room and I was hungry, and then some fruits on the table just a few feet away, but I could not bring myself to the table to have fruit, total denial of my will. And then another example is at that time I was 24 years old, maybe 23, 24, still a young man. But for 2 years, I lost my sexual desire. I didn't feel anything for 2 years. So something happened to me. My mind, my body, what have you, just.
Yeah.
And then, in addition to that, 5 years after I was open, because my career was destroyed in Tokyo. So as a way to start my new life, I decided to come to the University of Washington. And so I quit my job, came to Seattle, and then enrolled in graduate program. And then I started going to school. All of a sudden, crisis happened. I couldn't study. I couldn't use my mind. So another crisis.
Yeah.
And then at that time, I was with a Seattle group. We have about 5 members at that time, including Rashad Hopkins, as you might know him.
Yeah.
And finally, they talked me into writing to Baba about my situation. And then I'm one of those people who just do not want to, bring my personal problems to Baba, but I was forced to write to him. So I did, explaining the situation, and he responded. I still have a copy of that letter. While you're studying, stop doing Larihan. To me, it was another death sentence, because Larihan was the most important thing to my life. So, staying in school, studying, continue studying, or just quit and go back to Japan so that I could resume my Larihan. But finally, I was talked into following Baba's advice.
Yeah.
So when I stopped doing Larihan, my mind came back to me.
Good. I think it was a good thing to follow Bapak's advice, huh?
Yes, yes. But I was too young. And then at that time, in hindsight, I would say, I didn't know how to maintain my balance, material or physical, and then inner or spiritual. So I was too much into one aspect of my life, neglecting the others. So I think not maintaining a balance between the two probably caused so-called crisis,
Yeah.
as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. So have you had any experiences around Bapak or being with Bapak or in that kind of situation?
Okay, first one, I was open in early January of 1959. And Baba came to Tokyo in February of 1959. I was just a month into that at Subud. So I was listening to Baba's talk, but nothing much happened. In terms of my personal contact with Baba, I think it was in 1974 around that time. We had a Subud meeting in San Mateo National University.
Yeah.
And then Baba was on the way down to Los Angeles. And I was one of those, following him. And then he stopped in Carmel Valley. And then, as usual, I was sitting in the back. But at that time, I was a regional helper for Rocky Mountain region. So Hana Maquiras called me out, hey, you're a regional helper. You have to come down, come up. So I was sitting on the front row. It was not my intent. And I was just 6-7 feet away from Baba. And then he zapped me. At that time, I was in a different space, totally overwhelmed with his power or whatever, strong energy, just took over. That was the most impressive experience, personally. And then later on, I saw him in Miramar hotels, and then during the Ramadan at the Chirandak, but I never had that kind of dramatic experience.
So how has Subud affected your material life?
Material had been very tough.
Yeah.
Because again, I didn't know way back, we didn't know much about possible impact of spiritual practice on a daily life. So at the time I went through that terrible crisis, there's no such concept as Subud crisis, right? We didn't know. And everybody was still new in Subud, not much experience into it. But in hindsight, no matter how hard it must have been, that was my destiny. I had to stay with it.
Yeah. So in these crises that you talk about, can you describe how you were feeling, or did it feel like something that was like a purification for you, or how would you describe it?
In addition to my own experience, and then I did some reading, I think first thing which might have happened to me was a physical purification, such as losing all sexual drive, the young man. That was physical, psychological. And then cleansing went on into different area. Oh, another thing, while I was still a young man in Tokyo, Japanese eat pork as much as beef and chicken. And then each time I had a pork, I had terrible diarrhea. And then after about 3-4 times, I started connecting the dots.
So,
Then I think after physical, I think I was agnostic, by the way. If I were interested in Subud, if Subud was the way it was way back in 1959, I wouldn't have been a Subud member. Because at that time, belief in God or something was not a requirement to be open. At that time, everything was wide open.
yeah.
So I was agnostic, even though I was really interested in religion and spirituality. I can really talk about it. I was just kind of a strange kid, a young man. I didn't live like anybody else. However, conceptually, I was very difficult. It was difficult for me to accept the Judeo-Christian definition of God, the Almighty God.
Mm-hmm.
As a matter of fact, when I was in the 5th grade, my neighbor took me to Christian church in Osaka, non-denominational Christian church. And then I went home 5th grade, 6th grade, and 7th grade, Sunday school, every Sunday. But one day, my friend, who was about 24, 5 at the time, young architect, he took me to overnight retreat, young man. I don't know why he took me over. I was still 7th grade. And then while I was listening to those grown-ups talking, I really felt hypocrisy.
Well, prophecy.
Hypocrisy.
Oh, hypocrisy.
Hypocrisy.
Yes.
And then at the same time, as I was a 7th grader, I could not accept the idea of original sin, one of the Christian tenets of original sin. I was still a young man. I couldn't accept that. So 7th grade, I dropped out and never gone back to church, Christian church. However, I continued to be interested in religion and spirituality, I suppose. So when I was in high school, senior year, I initiated a Bible study group. Public high school, I have to get the permission from the school principal or something. And about 4 or 5 students once a week we got together after class and we studied Bible. And at that time, whenever I went home, I had my Christian prayer every day before I started doing my homework. But I never gone back to church. And so perhaps Subud was the right path for me.
Yeah. So I'm thinking back to your experience with the bomb when you were a child.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, it seems to me that's a lot of stuff to kind of carry, for a young person. Did you ever feel like doing the Latihan had an effect on those kind of feelings? Or
No, I don't. Of course, even today, that experience remains very direct. And, I still vividly remember how I felt, the blasted sights of people with a burns all over the body and screaming for pain. Yet it's a rather short duration thing. What I remember most out of whole experience was surviving under bombing and then hunger. I lived through hunger for just 5 years. The daydreaming of food as a young man, that was the most kind of critical memories I have. Because as you may know, Americans never experienced that hunger, prolonged hunger. It's very taxing, not only physically, but mentally and emotionally. It was very difficult.
So I guess from food shortages after the
Yes.
bombing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Then, we hardly had any protein. Only thing we have is a carbo. So many houses are burned. I was living in a big city, but all of a sudden we gained vacant land. So we started growing vegetables. So we managed to survive on vegetables we grew.
Yeah.
But I haven't seen eggs or butter or meat for many years.
Very difficult time.
But thank God I'm still alive, age 86. A miracle of life.
You seem to be doing well.
Oh, luckily, I'm still playing tennis 3 times a week.
Very good.
Still running around on tennis court.
At 86, that is impressive.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, do you have any other stories or experiences that you've had in Subud that you'd like to talk about?
Yes. Somehow, when I was young, in old days, after 2-3 years in Subud, we are appointed to be helpers. In hindsight, it's a horror story.
Horror
How could I be a helper? And then until 1976, until the time I moved from Denver, then I was living in Denver to California for a new job. I was a regional helper for Rocky Mountain region. And but I never been a part of mainstream Subud life. Somehow I felt not comfortable being a part of the group. The reason is, as you might know, in old days and 70s, we throw away a lot of exotic nouns, Arabic name, words or Indonesian words, and smoking that smelly Indonesian cigarette kind of things. And somehow, even though I came from Japan as an adult, I was living in America, something, sort of surrendering our own culture and then to a foreign culture, or try to assimilate to foreign culture and tradition.
Yeah.
It didn't seem right for me. So, for instance, early 70s, I was living in Albuquerque, and so many Sioux members stayed at my house on the way to Sky Mountain in 73. But I never felt drawn to that kind of movement. I just stayed on my career at that time. living just normal life. And even today, rather than staying totally within the Subud confine, I might say, Subud community, I may sound arrogant, but I don't mean that. Just to be a good fellow citizen to my neighbors in the community I live, and those people I come across. And then, even though I never talk about Subud, unless I was asked to, and they don't know what I've been doing. I don't think that they're aware, but somehow they feel drawn to me. I don't sound cocky, but I'm talking about the fact. And I don't think people know why they feel that way. In this community, I was only probably out of 32,000 people. I was one of the few non-white people in this community. And then people primarily from upper Midwest, Michigan, Minnesota, and Wisconsin. And some are from your state too, Washington. In the wintertime, a lot of Canadians, primarily from Ontario. I'm a real foreigner, right? One of the few non-white people in this town, but they seem to feel something. And then, of course, I'll be open to talk about Subud, the spirituality, if it's warranted. But so far, it hasn't happened, with the exception of only once. One of the tennis friends from Alaska, she sent something and we started talking about spirituality. And then I finally mentioned the Subud. And so I set up a meeting between her and then a local Subud helpers. And it turned out to be a disaster. So to be honest with you, I'm not feel comfortable bringing people to Subud at this time. And, I don't know how I feel. Unless we have a solid infrastructure, Subud, truly qualified helpers, speak to somebody, potential applicant, in a very decent manner. I don't think that new people will be attracted to that. I'm talking about based on my own experience, immediate experience. It's not a conceptual thing.
Yeah.
So I'm speaking to myself, even though I'm not the active helper. I was a helper for many years, and I feel my own deficiencies, being as effective helpers. So I'm just happy trying to be a good citizen to my neighbors.
Have you been to many of the World Congresses?
Most recently, the Freiburg, Germany.
Mm-hmm. And you were in the first one in Germany, right?
In 1975, Wolfsburg, yes. And then, by the way, I still have a picture. You, Antoine, myself, three of us standing just outside of the, what do you call that zone? West Germany, East Germany boundary, and then minefield.
Yeah.
Do you remember?
I remember that.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
1975.
Yeah.
Yes. Talking of that, the last Congress, again, I've been an isolated member here, and my wife and I just do Latvian 3 times a week at home. We had another member here, relatively new member. He, due to his health illness, he had to give up his home here, move to a facility in Tucson. So I've been talking to him on the phone every single day. But so we lost a member. So just two of us to Larian by ourselves. And but that meeting, Congress, I realized we're all old. Not many young people.
Yeah.
So as I mentioned briefly in my email to you, I myself 86. And then when I look around the Congress from all over the world, many of them are 70s or at least 60s and 70s, some 80s and myself. So my mind kicks in, and then I do worry about the future. And this a mass of young people coming to Subud, what's going to happen? I know that some people say it's God's will, so I have no business worrying about, but I think about that.
Yeah.
And talking of that, again, please allow me to say my mind. I may be saying something not politically correct.
Okay.
About 6 months ago or something, this idea started coming in. Not idea, just the feeling or whatever. That is, as far as the US is concerned, Subud may no longer exist in 50 years. I don't know, that numbers came to me. I don't know. I hope that will not be the case. I hope it will be my mind trick. But another thing about Subud, testing is such an integral part of Subud institution. But I do have some apprehension about testing. If you want to talk about, ask me about my thought, I would be, but otherwise, this is what I have to say. Because of my apprehension about ability to receive correctly, I sort of avoid doing the formal testing. Mostly I rely on spontaneous receiving. And then amazingly, when I look back, without thinking anything, I tend to receive something out of the blue in the course of my normal daily living.
Yeah.
Sometimes a thought, feelings, or sometimes I come across something, and then sometimes I come across somebody unexpectedly, and they seem to give me guidance. So talking of Subud testing, my preferred way of testing is spontaneous receiving.
Yeah.
Because of those feelings I have, I cannot be a helper anymore, right? It goes against the grain of Subud institution. So I'm happy to be doing this without being an active helper.
Yeah. Well, I feel similar things myself, but
Oh, you do, okay. So I'm happy to know I'm not alone. Talking of that some years ago when I was still a young man, I heard the Tibetan holy man coming to this country, and in order to give guidance to somebody, he gets up at 4 a.m, cleanse his body, go into meditation or two, and then his day begin to meet American followers, whatever. Even a holy man does that. And the way we do Larihan, Subud testing, we just get off the street, go into the Subud, that Larihan hall, and do 30 minutes of Larihan. And then how could he expect to receive true guidance, to hear God's voice? I think it's a little too arrogant to me, or myself. If I really am able to receive, I have to prepare myself accordingly. Several hours of quiet time, something to try to listen to God's voice. And then I have to say, we may be too optimistic. We haven't collectively here in America, I don't think we've gone that high yet, higher stage of development. And just coming out of 30 minutes Larihan, here, being a helper, I could hear God's voice. Well, we may have to be careful about that. That's my feeling.
Yeah, here in this country, we have a lot of material influences that
Yes, right.
are hard to overcome.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So have you been back to Japan?
About 3 years ago, I did to visit my family.
Yeah. How was your experience there? Did you see any of the Subud people or anything?
No, I did not, because I stayed in Kyoto, and then there's no longer a group in that area. The gentleman who I hardly knew him, who was the heart and soul of the Kyoto group, passed away. I find that out in the World Congress, talking with the Japanese members. So I did not contact anybody. But Tatebe-san, we called in Japan, Rozak Tatebe, I've kept up with him. Occasionally we exchange emails, and then sometimes he asks me what's going on in Subud in the US, and that kind of thing. So I kept some copies of email exchanges. Yeah, he was a very special man to me.
Yeah. Were you at the Congress in Tokyo in 1967?
Yes, I was. By the way, you took many pictures of me. I still have some here. Can you see it? I'm speaking on the stage.
Can't really tell.
Okay. What happened was in 1967, the day after I defended my thesis for master's degree to the University of Washington, I got on a plane in Seattle. I went to Tokyo, and then Yomiuri land. At that time, I was not active, in terms of doing Larihan, but I kept up. I stayed with a group, certain members group, like in Seattle group. But anyway, I just wanted to go because World Congress in Tokyo. So I went there, and then immediately I was thrown into a liaison job between the Japanese Congress Committee and then International Congress Committee. And then because my language skill I acquired, I was going back and forth. Sure, I was there. And then I did not have a profound experience out of that Congress, spiritual, but I was busy doing the work.
I had a great time there, taking pictures and meeting people. It was really nice. I liked it.
Recently, I sent some of the old photos I have with Hamid Camp, playing guitar and singing, that kind of things. and then Mas Usman standing next to that kind of photos I sent to archives.
Ah, good, good. Ah, I don't think I have any other questions.
Okay. By the way, getting back to the idea about the future of Subud
Yeah,
in Western world, for instance, Amsterdam used to be a large group, and then they have a Subud house in town, but my friend Michael was complaining that nobody showed up, and only a few showed up, and then no helpers and something. And then when he was still active as a helper about 3-4 years ago, he had to go, unlock the door and open the place, and nobody showed up, that kind of stuff. So I don't know what's going on in other parts of Europe, but I am concerned, just all of us who stayed in Subud. I was open about 64 years ago, something like that, 63, 64. It's a big part of my life. We can all say that we cannot separate Subud from our life, right?
yeah, yeah.
Okay. And then that Subud may or may not exist in this country. If should that happen, sure, as a human beings, have an attachment to it. I don't know whether God feels about it, but as a human, I have my own feeling. So you are more in touch with other people. So would you give me some idea about, some other people may think about those things or not? Hopefully not.
Well, I don't feel pessimistic about Subud because I feel that God's power and God's timing is different from our timing.
Yes, yes.
So what's going to happen with Subud, I don't know, but I don't feel bad about it. I feel like I think it's just a matter of timing, and it may not be in our time, but it will probably come in the next number of years. I don't know.
Perhaps in a slightly different manner or form, could be.
Could be.
Once first generation goes away, younger generations may take it up in a different way.
Yeah.
From a different kind of community, Subud community.
Yeah.
Again, as I mentioned before, rather than just staying sort of, I hate to use those words, but incestual kind of community, I believe in meeting other people, population at large, rather than talking among ourselves.
Yeah.
I think we don't have to talk about Subud, but I believe that some kind of energy is getting out there, of being in the community.
Yeah.
It may take that kind of form, not necessarily inclusive within Subud community, but in a different manner.
Yeah.
But I'm not all those pessimistic, I happen to be keeping up with Kenneth Clark. He gives me a call unexpectedly most recently from Australia, a few weeks ago, and other times from London. And I know what he's doing. Wherever he goes, very thriving. Now he's in Australia, meeting a bunch of people, visiting all the Subud groups and communities, and England. He's just contribution to that Subud project in Louis group, by the way. So when I hear that, it's thriving, right?
Yeah.
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 So I may have to kind of caution myself.
Yeah. So,
But
yeah,
anyway, what I have to say is that I'm so grateful that I met Subud. Otherwise, as I said, more than likely I will not be living now.
yeah,
Without this experience, I wouldn't have been able to survive in this world. So I'm very grateful. By the way, my life is just great now. You know, I think I've come to be able to make a balance between spiritual and material. Finally, and then I think this is one of those things helpers may have to be cognizant, dealing with younger members. As happened to myself, some of us who value spiritual more than material, but as long as we live here with a body on earth, we have to take care of our jobs, right?
yeah,
Material aspect. So try to achieve some kind of balance between the two. As I said, I failed to do that when I was young. As a result, life was extremely difficult. But
yeah.
now, at my ripe old age, I think I've come to a place where I could manage those various forces. And then my life is the best now. I'm very grateful.
Very
Yeah.
good. Yeah. And I can,
Again, thank God.
and I can say the same thing.
Okay, good. You've been around,
Yeah.
a long time.
Yeah.
Very important part of civil community, at least in this country. Thank you. Yeah.
So, any other things you would like to say before I close out?
Oh, okay. I watched your interview with was your Kalisha,
Mhm.
and then a visit to Hopi.
Yes.
Would you like to talk about it? Or
Yes, I meant to ask you about that. Could you talk about that experience?
okay. So first of all, what amazed me is your Kalisha's detailed account of what happened. I don't have that kind of mind. I don't remember any details, but I'll be happy to share with you what I remember.
Okay.
If I remember correctly, the 1973 January, arrangement has been made by Harlan McQuills, I suppose, for us to meet with Hopi elders. So both Harlan and then your Kalasha had contact with one of the elders in Haraville. There's many villages in Hopi. It's between the second and third mesa. His name is, I should write it down. Yeah, David Monogia. At that time, I think he was about 60-ish. And then, so first generation national helpers, 3 men, 3 women national helpers, and then Prio Hartono, and then your character and myself set out there. And I was living in Albuquerque at that time, about 4-hour drive, I think, Hopi land, 4 or 5 hours. And then I don't know how I managed that. I was not living in a large house, but we set up sort of headquarters at my home, and then people came, and we set out to Hopi land. And then amazingly, I don't know why I was invited to go. I was just a regional helper for Rocky Mountain region. And then, why the national helpers and Prio Hartono invited me to go with them, I still don't remember why. I'm not the Indian either. So we went there. And then this is a big surprise. We got national helpers, first generation, three. But they wanted to meet with Prio and me. Why me? Because we're the two non-white people. Can you imagine? So one evening, David Monagia's adopted son, Preston Monagia, Yo talked about him in your interview with him. He took us to a house, and in conversation, those people did not speak any English, even though I know they could speak English, but they spoke Hopi, and then Preston Monagia interpreted for us. So two elders, and then two of us, Prio and myself, and then Preston as the interpreter. And then my recollection differs from that of Yo. He kept referring to dear clan's elders, but I distinctly remember two gentlemen we met. One was an antelope priest, another was a snake priest. In other words, one of the elders, if not the elders, of the antelope clan and then snake clan. The only thing I remember, not in details, was Prio explained how Subud started, and then Baba's experience, revelation, all those things. And then they listened, and then what they just told us in summary was, yes, it's your way, and they have their own way, but we all look to God, same God. So just keep your way, we'll keep our way. I think that was a account.
Okay.
It's very cordial, no discussion per se. We should listen to one another. However, I may have to say, I think it's very unusual. I read the book of Hopi, later on, so I know something about Hopi community religion, but they brought in large, I think, a deer skin depicting Hopi prophecy, or the diagram symbols. And then according to their explanation, this means World War I. This is a World War II that happened. And then if I remember correctly, to my surprise, the prophecy hinted there will be a World War III. I still remember that. I was really stunned to hear that. But it's come to materialize or not, I have no idea. By the way, can you see this small moccasin? This was a gift given to Prio Hartono and myself, a souvenir, deerskin moccasin. I treasured that. I still had it. It's given to us in 1973. So it was a memorable experience. Of course, we stay at the Native Americans' home, very basic, and then, as Joe mentioned, many of us slept on the floor. I think I slept in a bed. I remember that. It's a very primitive community on top of the mesa, and then January, very cold night. Outhouses are one edge of the mesa, and we have to walk across the field to go to the bathroom. And they totally depend on one spring. I didn't see it, but during the day, I looked down. It's the middle of the mesa somewhere, and the people just took the narrow path with a bucket full water. They went down, fetch the water, and then bring it back, long way back to top of the mesa where they live. And then, of course, there's no electricity, no running water. And then David Monagia, I went back to visit afterwards. And the last time I heard from him was from the hospital somewhere before he passed away. He was in trouble because he was an elder, tried to maintain the traditional lifestyle, but the younger people wanted running water and power. And of course, BIA will be happy to provide, they have enough fund to bring in infrastructure. But the elders at the time refused to bring in infrastructure. And I asked them why. And his answer was, once we got suckered into modern way of life, we have to pay for it, pay the bill. It means cash. So they don't want to get into the white man's way of living, earning money to pay for it. So they wanted to keep that way. And I don't know whether they are still living like that or they've already brought in power and then running water. I don't know. I haven't been there for a long, long time. So those are things I remember. And then you mentioned how sacred, how special Hopi tribe is compared to other Native Americans. So they are very special people. And then one more thing, to my surprise, already I was a white man living in Albuquerque, one of the Americans. I think it was just after I was naturalized, I think. But it's a gift to bring to Hopi people, sack of flowers, a big hunk of beef. And can you imagine, it was just not the ordinary, gift item, right? So anyway, the Hanan knew about Indian lifestyle. I was not. So that was a best gift, possible gift. Flour and chunk of beef. So I still remember we brought them as a gift.
Yeah.
Those are things I remember. Way back in 1973. Special time.
Yeah. Well, my last question is, do you have any objections to me putting this video out so that other people can watch it?
If you consider what I've said acceptable to general consumption.
Okay. I
It's
do.
up to you. It's up to you. I was very honest, my age, I don't want to play any game, saying nicety, it's not me. I just speak my mind. And then, so if it's okay with you, you're welcome to do that. Make it available to other people. I'm just one of those old guy fading away from the face of the earth. But life has been good. Life has been good. And even though I took the road, Robert Frost line, I took the road less traveled by virtue of quitting a job and coming to this country. In the beginning, was a language problem. I still have a problem, right? But life has been very good. And I'm really grateful for what America has given to me. Life has been very good. And then Subud is a big part of it. There's no question about it.
Thank you.
But somehow, God can really look down and then see our needs. Huh?
Yeah.
Without this path, probably I won't be here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for doing this.
Thank you for the opportunity. Yeah. I hope that I don't offend anybody, hopefully. Yeah.
So I'm I'm going to turn off the recording
Okay.
now.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Take good care. All right.
You too. Thanks.
All right. Thank you.